so let's go to the quiz. And Basic Real Estate Concepts Review Quiz. So let's look at this. Everybody ready? All right. Which of the following is not an ownership characteristic of land? And what did you all say? C. Non-homogeneity is a description, isn't it? Real estate is unique. By the way, that's what that means. Non-homogeneity means unique. And I believe I mentioned to you on Monday when we talked about the word personal property, I said to you, unfortunately, you need to know other words for the same word, like chattel for personal property. Uniqueness and non-homogeneity means the same thing. So let's talk about the opposite. Heterogeneity means the same. So, just kind of paying attention to some just words. Not every word we're going to speak about in here is a real estate word. There are just words. Which of the following is not a physical characteristic of land? D. D dog, right? Number 3, all of the following are economic characteristics except. How about D? That's not economic, that's physical, right? The economic was scarcity, location, improvement, and permanence of investment, right? Alrighty. Highest and best use, number 4, is described as D. The use that will give the best return on the investment. 5, all of the following are improvements on the land. So when they put it in quotes, they're wanting you to pay attention to own the land and accept. D, sidewalks. So let's talk about it. An improvement is something added to the lot, to the land, to the parcel. If it's literally on the parcel, it means like the house, the fence, the driveway. If it's to the parcel, it would be sidewalks, roads, street lighting. Does that make sense? City and water and sewage.
Back to that one. I chose C because, and I know it's wrong. A shed you can take it with you, and a sidewalk, a fee will stay there.
Well, that's not the question. Good point. Jose, did you all hear Jose? He said he chose C because storage shed you can take with you. Well, I'm going to say maybe or maybe not. And then sidewalks you can't. But that's not the question. The question that might be a good question for your statement would be, is this a fixture or not? And we'll talk about that here directly in Unit 2. But they're just asking about the improvement. Is it on the land, directly on it, or is it to the land that will probably give some kind of a value to the property? If there's sidewalks, that's probably going to give you some improvement to your property. Good question.
Can I digress just a little bit?
Okay.
Because I'm confused about number 2.
Me too.
Because it says, in chapter 2, it says, which is not a physical characteristic of land.
Okay, guys, let's listen. I'm okie dokie if I made a mistake. I'm okie dokie with it. I'm okie dokie. All right, go with me.
So on page 4, it actually lists indestructibility, immobility, and uniqueness as physical characteristics.
Okay, so what's the answer then?
I thought the answer should be B. Right answer, because, yeah.
It is B.
Okay.
Yay!
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Renee. And you know what? Here's my excuse. I typed all my own answers up, and it's probably a little bit of a typo. So, what number was that?
That was number 2.
2. Thank you, ma'am. Hey, how do y'all know I didn't do that on purpose? That's my story. Because it's a learning moment. Thank you so much. All righty, where are we now? 6. Which of the following are improvements to the land? D, all of the above. 7, all of the following are disadvantages of real estate as an investment, except D. Number 8, real estate brokerage is defined as D, dog. Bringing together buyers and sellers. 9, which of the following statements is correct? What? Ooh, I got another typo here. It's C, isn't it? Okay, good. 10, which of the following is most true concerning supply and demand? C.
Oh, thank God I put an asterisk instead.
What? You got it? C. The real estate market, number 11.
D.
D. Local in nature. 12. I know what happened on that mistake. This is really true what happened. Because I don't like to make mistakes. I was doing my answer sheet for myself and I went over to another tab and it threw my answers off because I'm seeing a couple of other ones here. Where are we? Number 12?
Yes.
When population in a city increases, C, home prices will increase, no, not C, let's see. All right, let me look.
I took A.
I chose B.
See?
I chose D.
No, it's A. All right, let me look, hold that thought, I can't think. Housing supplies will generally increase. Guys, that's true. When a city is growing, and housing can be apartments. Rent doesn't go down when population increases. Think about people coming in that are, the pay is not, it's just workers coming in, for manufacturing or that sort of thing. And people do like to rent. So A would be the answer there. 13, an increase in supply of usable land may result from D, all of the above. Which of the following is considered private control of land?
A.
B. All right, here's a teachable moment, everybody. Now, just think with me for a minute, because there's going to be a lot of information as we go through the course. Think about words and what just a word means. Doesn't restrictive sound kind of private? Doesn't that word sound private? Restrictive. So that's private control, like restrictive covenants, protective covenants. Covenants are rules or, rules and regulations that are in a particular neighborhood. Zoning is for everybody. Zoning's public, like residential zone, commercial zone, industrial, and what else? Special purpose, some of those. Alrighty, and where are we? 15? Which of the following usually has the greatest effect on value? B, boy.
How do you pronounce that word?
Situs. Situs. Remember we said that's location with preference, an area preference. So 15 is B. Alrighty. Let's look at the math I sent you home just for a few minutes. Remember we said that we will do math as we can. And so I'll just talk about a few of them. And because this is why we give homework and this is why we give the solutions. But number 1 is a real important one to understand. The question is, and so much that's the challenge, and I don't mean that as a duh statement, but sometimes the question you're given, you need to figure out what's the question that they're asking in that question. And number 1, they're asking about how many square yards. Everyone, a square yard isn't a yard 3 feet? A yard is 3 feet. So a square, which that's not really a square, but a square is 3 by 3, a square, the sides are all the same, right? So a square yard, if you're getting the area or the square footage, it's 9 square feet. So when we're looking for area of a room, area of a house, area of a road, you multiply width times depth. Now the question is, how many 9s are in those two square footages? How many 9s will go in there? Tell me if that makes sense. How many 3 by 3s? Well, how do you divide 3 by 3 into something? You divide 9 into something. So you multiplied, I hope, 18 by 20. Did everybody understand to do that? And then you multiplied 15 by 12 and added it together. And so you got 560, 540, and then divide 9 into 540. Just the last step is arithmetic. And you got 60. Everybody okay on that? So you do need to know how to get square footage. 18 by 20, that's square footage. 15 by 12, that's square footage. And then you need to know the conversion for square yards. And remember that 9. All right, number 2, how many square feet? Everybody good on number 2?
Yeah.
So, you know, we're getting area. Okay, we're getting area, right? And that's how you get area, everybody. Now, I'm not trying to dumb it down, excuse that language, but there are a lot of students that really need for us to talk basically, and I'll talk basically as long as I can, but there will be a point that I'm just going to have to pretty much presume that you're studying and reading and practicing this math on your own. I do have students in every class that get stuck on area problems, and there are students that'll get stuck on other math too throughout the class. But area is one that some students just can't do, and I don't know if it's the visual of it or the understanding of it. So if you're struggling with area, don't beat yourself up on it. There'll be other math that I'm sure you'll catch on to easier. But keep practicing it, and we'll keep sending you work home that you can. Number 3, now I bet you everybody got your commission. Well, now, I hope you did. Golly.
I did.
You did? Well, let me show you. Remember the X bar? I'm going to call Mr. T. Remember that I talked to you about the other day? And there's a multiply. Guys, this is the 3-in-1 math formula that you'll either divide or multiply. And I'm not a math genius or a math professor, but here's what I'm going to say, like I said Monday. If multiply doesn't look right, turn around and divide it, because it's going to be multiply or divide in this formula, okay? So isn't the sales price a big number? Isn't the sales price probably bigger than the commission you're going to make? If the number you're given is bigger than the number you're looking for, it goes on the bottom. Let me say that again. If the number you're given is bigger than the number you're looking for, it goes on the bottom. If the number you're given is smaller than the number that you're looking for, the small number always goes on top, kind of like the visual of the fraction. Remember we said 3/4 converts to 0.75? That's the T-bar example. So, and again, students say, I don't know which number goes where. Well, just, you start somewhere. You got to start working and not be afraid of it. And so, rate's always over here. What was it, 5.5? I'll just put that. Now, you can decide for yourself when you're doing your math, do you want to do the decimal version? I don't like to do decimals because honestly I have to stop and think, where does it go? I mean, I know you go 2 places to the left if you're converting percent to decimal, You go 2 places to the right if you're converting decimal to percent, but still I have to stop and think. To me, it's easier to say 5.5 and hit the percent key on my calculator. And guys, I'm telling you, having a percent key is going to be hugely helpful. That's what I like to use. Multiply it out and you get a smaller number. And what was that? 13,000? All right, let's look at.
Everyone knows that 13,000 doesn't go into the agent's pocket.
That's not what you get.
That gets split a lot amongst a lot of people.
You know what? That's an excellent point because that's what our buyers and sellers will see, and that's what they think we get. And there are times, even though, you know, what part you make out of the commission is between you and the company that you choose to work for, and that really isn't between you and the buyer and the seller. This is your personal agreement with your company. How much of that do I get? Guys, there will be times that you may have to sit down and say to your seller, I don't get that. Let me tell you, it's broken down about 4 times. So I'll get a little, like 1/4 of it maybe. And so, you know, we'll talk about that later when we get into commission math. But yeah, we don't get all that. All right, number 4. Seller Sam owns 2 acres, sells it for $8.25 per square foot. Everyone, when you look at this, here's what I want you to be thinking. I've got something in acres and I've got something in square footage. I need to get it into a common format, don't I? Converting, we don't know how many square foot yet, do we? So we can convert the acreage to square footage. So you need to remember the square footage conversion. And 1 acre has 43,560 square feet. You must remember it. It's going to be, you need to know this. 43,560 square feet in 1 acre. If you've got 2 of them, just multiply by 2, and then you'll multiply by the $8.25. Questions on that? You do have to remember that. Now, the way I remember it, and I can remember telling a class one night, and there was a gentleman in my class, he's pretty sophisticated, came in a suit, coat and tie, getting off work, just coming to my night class, and I told him how to remember this, and he just went a little bit nuts on me and said, that's just too corny, Jan, that's just too corny, and that's just, corny. And I said, okay. Richard Petty's race car number is 43. And Richard Petty's race car number is 43. He's the king around here, the race car driver. Y'all, if you don't know him, look him up. Anyway, if he drove 56 miles an hour around the track, how many races do you think he'd win? 0. That's my message to you. 43,560. Well, I want you to know he came back the next night, all beaming and bubbling, and Jan, I'll never forget it. I was telling everybody at work, and they just loved it. I'll never forget it. You know what? Whatever you can do to remember something, you know, if it's corny, if it's silly sounding, who cares? You know, we're trying to remember something, and I bet you kind of will. So anyway, we got to remember that. How many acres are in 653,400? So guys, that's just arithmetic. 653,400. How many of these go into that? Now, if you didn't know the square footage in an acre, you wouldn't have known that. But they're just saying, how many of these will go into that? Now, ma'am?
I was just gonna say, what if I just flipped and I did the T table, whatever you call it?
For
T-bar.
which question are you on?
Number, the one you're on now.
Okay, can I ask you to stop 1 minute? Can I ask you to stop 1 minute? I apologize. The T-bar doesn't work for everything. A I don't use the T-bar in my area problems as much as I do in my commission and my taxes and my interest and that sort of thing. So I'm sorry if I misled you on that, but the T-bar doesn't work for everything. It works for,
Equations.
huh?
Equations.
Yeah, it works for most things, like if you're solving for equation
I was
cases.
just going for, thank you, that's great info.
Well,
I
what you,
just flipped it and did 653,400 divided by, and got to 15 acres.
well, that's just, it's just arithmetic.
Same thing.
But see, that wouldn't have been the T, so let me tell you why it's not the T.
Okay,
Because the T has the big number down here
right,
and the little number on top.
okay.
So in your mind, well, and that's okay because you're at least
Yeah.
thinking about it, you just did arithmetic.
Okay.
And, well, I shouldn't say that, you did arithmetic, not just, or do you understand what I mean? So T-bar doesn't solve everything, but what I can tell you is it's gonna solve a whole bunch. But good job, that's good thinking, I'm glad you brought that up though. But when we're doing the T, a little number always goes on top, so think about it like a fraction. What would a fraction look like? Littler number on top, bigger number on the bottom. Alrighty, so these fractions and decimals, or decimals and percentages, I beg your pardon, guys, you can go back and look at the solutions that I gave you. Let's hurry up and get to 9 and 10. Now, 9 and 10, you can do the T. Did any of y'all try to do that? If you didn't, why don't you try now? Number 9 and 10, set those up in the X or the T-bar, whatever you want to call it, because you certainly can. You're solving for one thing, and you just need to say, what am I looking for? Am I looking for a rate? Or am I looking for something part of a bigger number? Or am I looking for a bigger number? Okay, let me kind of guide you just 1 second. Look at number 9, just read the question. Do you think you're looking for something less than 3,000 or more than 3,000? Less. Guys, think about it for a moment. They're asking you, what's 60% of something? Isn't 60% of something less than the 100% that the total is? So you're looking for 60%. 60% is a part out of 100%. So if you're looking for something smaller, you multiply. And so that's all you do on that. Does that make sense? And here's a little word clue. Maybe not always this will help, but I think it does a lot of the times. When you see of, I'm sort of thinking out of, and it makes me want to multiply. If I see something that says per, when I see per, I'm thinking I'm going to try dividing. At least you can try it, and if it doesn't work, do the opposite. Justin, do you have a question?
No, ma'am. Are you about to explain 10?
Yes.
Yeah, I did it in a weird way, but.
Okay, it's okay. By the way, Justin said he did number 10 in a weird way. Guys, you don't have to do your math my way. I am going to teach it the way, I'm going to present it to you basically the way the textbook does. You don't have to do math my way. If you have a way to do it and you're getting the problem, don't try to upset your apple cart and try to learn it, because that's just going to cause you pressure. However, I am going to ask you to try to learn how to do the math instead of something like this. Here's what I hear from time to time, almost every class. Miss Secor, I just worked every answer backwards until I got it.
Oh, no.
And I'm going to say, I don't like to hear that in a classroom. You know, try to learn something, venture in there, jump in the water, and try to figure out a formula. Of course, if you're taking a test, golly, I want you to do whatever you can except cheat. And maybe not take your shoes off if your feet stink, and count on your toes. We don't want none of that. But guys, in a testing environment, you can kind of freeze up and say, oh God, I'm just gonna work backwards and see. But while we're here, try to learn, just try to be adventurous and try to learn some of the math that we're looking at. Alrighty, so let's look at number 10. Justin, tell me how you did it.
I saw that 500 was 20%, so I just kind of figured that 250 was 10%, so I just worked myself all the way up to 100%.
So he worked himself up to 100%. In other words, he said, how many 20s are in 100%? 5. And so he just multiplied that times 5, sort of like. He did a little different. But how many 20% are in 100%? There are 5 of them, aren't they? Y'all see that? And he said, well, 5 times 500 gives me 100%. How about 500 divided by 20%? Put that in your calculator. And I think if you can start, and there's nothing wrong with that, but if you can start doing the T-bar, you'll see it's a time saver, and it'll be fun. So 500 divided by 20%, or 0.20, doesn't that give you 2,500 too? But that way's perfect. I mean, it's fine. Okay, so tonight, I've got you just a little quiz and a little bit of math. Everyone, just do what you can. My intention is not for you to stay up hours and hours and getting yourself all worked up. The point is to keep you on track. So just try to stay on track with your work, and then we'll get to it hopefully the next day that we're here, the day after your homework. All right. Any questions before we get started? Do you have your final exam outline review? Let's get that out. Alrighty, so we're going to look at Unit 2. And we opened the door to Unit 2 just a tiny bit when we were here Monday. But we're going to concentrate on some things in Unit 2. And Unit 2 will take the rest of the morning. And there'll be parts of Unit 2 that I'm not going to linger over. There are sections that are level 1 competency. And so we'll just talk about the terminology and then we'll move on. Now, I do have to, I'm going to throw this out here, not to be too strict, but to let you know how we need to get through the unit. This is a unit that students want to ask a lot of questions and have a lot of, well, my mama did this and my aunt did this, and can you tell me what it was? And I remember one time I bought a house and it was like this, and everyone, we can't go there. I really have to get through the lecture. So if you have a question, if you don't mind writing it down and holding it, I probably will address it. And then before we take our breaks, I'll ask what your questions are. Does that make sense? Because we do need to get through this unit today. And I know you'll get excited, but if you'll just hold your thoughts, write down your question, and then we'll address it. So on Unit 2, you've got 3 sections that you're going to be tested on or tested in. Now, flip over to your 4th page, which is the back of your 2nd page, and you've got a question or two in Unit 2 under your state section of your exam. Joyce, I don't believe there's one of these in what you have, so I'll get it for you on break. It's the exam review. Actually, I'll get you a packet when we take our next break. So do you see in Unit 2, you've got a question on tenants by the entirety, and then there's going to be a question on timeshare. So 5 questions out of this 1 unit, which really is a fairly long unit, which really isn't that much with all things considering. But like one thing I do want to point out to you, as far as the questions go, every once in a while you may have a question that says, which of the following is the best definition? But everybody, most of your questions are not like that. Most of your questions are more involved, so you'll need to know more than the definition. You'll need to know everything surrounding that topic. And so when we get into talking about fixtures, I'll show you what I mean. All right, so let's just talk a few minutes before we take our break. So we stopped on Unit 2. We stopped on page 24, beg your pardon, 24. I brought my glasses in here today because these lights are bugging me. Didn't we talk about the water rights? We talked about riparian, the doctrine of riparian rights. North Carolina, that's the theory that they follow. I do want you to go back, if you don't mind, to the last paragraph on page 23. Take a moment and read that paragraph. What do you think about that? I think it's real interesting, don't you? First come, first serve, you know. But then it says for beneficial use. So that's a little bit ambiguous or gray or interpretive, isn't it?
Beneficial for just the owner or beneficial for like everyone?
The one who's going to be, who knows? There's another good point. Beneficial, it reads like it's beneficial for the person who wants to use it. But that's a good point too, Kristen. So it's like, what does this really mean? We're going to talk, depending on when we meet again, we're going to talk a little bit about legal descriptions in Unit 4. And one of the legal descriptions that North Carolina does not use, but a lot of states west of the Mississippi uses is the rectangular survey method. And in the 1700s, when this was developed, the settlers were given the opportunity to have land, and they got on their horses, on their horseback, the guys did, because it was a man's world back then, and they galloped out and had stakes and staked it down on the land that they wanted. And that reminds me of that, first come, first serve. So that's really interesting to me, but I do think there's bound to be way more to it than just that. But for our needs right now, we just need to know that basic. Okay? All righty. And so look at your first paragraph on page 24. Riparian and littoral rights are appurtenant to the land. We talked about that term Monday. What is the definition of an appurtenance? An appurtenance, that word can be used differently. It's appurtenant to, it's attached to, it goes with. Remember we said an appurtenance is a right or a privilege that goes with. We talked about the air rights, the surface rights, the subsurface rights, and now water rights. Those go with. And what's really important and what I would highlight if I were you would be the next sentence. The end of that sentence. And cannot be retained when the property is sold. It means that the right to use the water belongs to the people who own the property, not the former owner. So if you own property and you're adjacent to water and you want to sell your property, you cannot say to the new buyer, I want to keep my water rights. You cannot retain them. You cannot keep them. Now, hopefully that kind of makes you start thinking about something. Because when we talk in this unit, we're going to talk about personal property and fixtures. And fixtures, even though it's something that became attached to the property, the owner of the property can say, but I want to take it. And as long as we know, and as long as we write it down and include it in the listing agreement or in the sales contract, It's okay, but water rights, they can never say, we want to keep it with us, or we want to take it with us. All righty. What about these words? Have you heard of the words accretion and the words reliction? Now, I think those are a little odd sounding words, but have you heard of the word erosion? You have. Have you heard of the word avulsion? Maybe not. But these are words, now this could just be a definition kind of a word, but accretion, and it has to do with how water affects land. And so accretion means that you could get land, you can acquire land by the gradual increase of land, and it's what water does when they deposit the sand. So water's depositing sand, which means that you can have more land, you can acquire more land, just naturally the acts of the water. And then reliction, you're also acquiring land by the action of the waters receding and the soil that is there when the water recedes. Avulsion, on the other hand, you're losing land, and by the acts of nature. When the acts of nature, water, when it removes soil, you're losing your land. Erosion, well, avulsion, let me just go on a little bit further. Avulsion is more sudden. Avulsion is like mudslide, or, have you seen on the weather channels where you'll see where there's big floods and this sort of thing in the back end of the house, and even the house falls in? That's called avulsion. That word sounds strong and bad to me. Erosion is the gradual wearing away of the land, just gradual. And then if you looked at your support rights, what is that about? We talked early about you do have subsurface rights when you own land. You've got surface rights when you own land, and you've got air rights. So what about these support rights? Did you read over it, and what do you think about that? Does it make sense? So what does lateral support mean?
Means that if someone's working on neighboring properties, you have the right for them not to, basically ruin your structure, for lack of a better word.
The structure of your land, right?
Yeah.
So Renee said laterally, if your next door neighbor is, if they're excavating or doing something in their yard, they shouldn't interfere with your support rights in your yard. Your land, for example, all the way down to the court, it shouldn't mess up your boundaries and your support. And what about the subjacent support then?
It's like you have to make sure that, so from what I gathered, it's like if there's something that's underground that you kind of want, you still have to make sure that the surface of everything is still going to be able to hold up and whatnot.
Justin said that very well. Did you hear? If you're digging underground, or if you sell your subsurface rights, mineral rights, remember I threw out the word fracking the other morning? If you sell that to someone and they're in here drilling and all, they should not ruin the right of your surface, that you can use your surface. Very good. We're at a good stopping point for a break. So let's take our first break, 10 minutes, and then we'll carry on here with fixtures.